Welcome to the Being Curious Show. I'm Brian Mariani, founder of No Shift Own.
And I'm Kelly Wagner, publisher of Edge Magazine. Our show is about curiously connecting teachers and seekers on a wide range of topics in a safe space. Few topics will be off limits, and we have some amazing guests to share with you.
Our intention is that our conversations will spark your own curiosity to create a life that lights you up and inspires you to be kind, thoughtful, open-minded to yourself and others.
We are on AM 950, Sundays at 2 p.m. and all podcast platforms. So, Brian, what are you curious about today?
Kelly, I'm curious. I'm a lot of things, but I'm also excited. Yeah, I'm a lot of things. Some good, a lot bad, but a good mix, a healthy balance.
Healthy balance. That's all we're looking for, man.
So we're very grateful. We're excited to really dive into a very interesting conversation today.
Our guest is from like the other side of the world. Like other side of the world.
How often do you think we're both going to do terrible Australian accents today?
That's all you.
Okay, I already did it, so I got it out of the way. We won't bother everybody again. So our guest today is from Australia. She's an author, Lynne Renior. She's lived an incredible life. She really has been in service to humanity in a big part through her two books. One is God Integrated, Reinterpreting the Divine, and her memoir, Leaving Faith, Finding Meaning, A Preacher's Daughter's Search for God. These are some pretty major topics.
These are some pretty amazing titles. Like, right?
Amazing titles. Ridiculous topics that are so important to explore. And we're really excited, Lynne, for you to be with us today. And for all those people who don't know you yet, please share a little bit about who you are and how you've come to be on our show today.
Well, I was raised in a Christian fundamentalist family, but I eventually found that Christianity for me did not work. So I decided after leaving home to try to work out why my faith was not working. So I completed a master's degree in psychology, followed by a PhD in philosophy. Then I discovered that whereas Christianity works for some people, it does not work for others. So I worked out that what makes a faith work is not the facts that you happen to believe about that faith, but what is happening at the deepest level of your being. And I'm arguing in the books that at the deepest level of our being, everything is one. So for our lives to be transformed, we have to connect to that inner oneness.
That's brilliant. I mean,
Beautiful.
It's true. So you grew up in an ultra-conservative Christian home. Tell us about that.
Well, my father was an evangelist, and he believed that God had dictated every word in the Bible, particularly the word of Solomon, that he must not spare the rod. So my father made himself a cane, and he beat me with this cane until I finally had the courage to leave home at the age of 23.
23 years of
23 years of being beaten with a rod.
So, I mean, I could go in 50 million different directions on that one. But how do you stay? How do you live through that? How do you for 23, I mean, you didn't just like at 16 go, I'm out, I'm leaving. Okay, so again, this is when I start seeing pictures. What was the final straw? What was the final act and interaction between you and your father where you're like, I'm packing my bags and I'm leaving?
Well, it was to do with my mother. My mother had said that I would be beaten until I was 21. Well, when my father beat me when I was 23, I said to my mother, you said the beatings would stop when I was 21. And she said, 21, that's just something that's recognised by the state. It has no validity in this home. Your father has the right to beat you as long as you're under his roof. So I thought, well, I better get out because otherwise I'll be beaten for the next 20 or 30 years.
So Lynn, I'm curious if that felt not like it felt appropriate or good or normal, but was it your world? What was it?
Good
Was it
question.
what was natural to you? Or did you recognize even from a very young age that this was not how other kids were raised? It was not how you wanted to live in the world? Or did that come later?
Oh, I thought the whole thing was outrageous. I
Okay.
knew that other
And I'm not
I knew
laughing
that-
at you. I'm like, okay,
Well,
thank
because
you.
some people get raised in cults and they literally
Think it's
don't.
normal.
They it's all they know. So I was just curious if that was your upbringing.
Oh, no. The problem was that my father saw himself as God's representative in the family. So if God told him he had to use the cane, he had to use the cane.
So what would trigger the use of the cane? Was this something that was a daily occurrence? Was it because you washed the dishes wrong? Was it because you went to bed wrong? Was it because you questioned something? I mean, I'm assuming, keyword assuming, that you wouldn't be having a beautiful day and your dad just went and said, it's time to get the switch out. I mean, what would happen to trigger such occurrences?
Well, the first beating happened when I was 4 and I had forgotten to put my toys away. So I was beaten for that. Then I had an accident and I broke some eggs and I was beaten for that. I was not allowed to question anything that my father did. I had to be perfect, in other words. He would not tolerate anything other than perfection.
And I know that there's some obvious context around a period in time where this type of behavior was more accepted than it is today. But I'm also aware that there's never, in my interpretation of history, there has been a common sense factor of beating or bullying isn't generally appropriate. And so I'm wondering if there was anyone in your world, a school teacher, a friend, a parent from another family who maybe had a conversation with you to say, hey, this isn't right. Can I help? Was there anyone who helped you ever?
There was nobody that I could turn to. I was all alone.
So I
Okay.
think
Go for it, Brian.
I was just going to say there's an interesting so there's another book that you wrote and it is called I believe The Abuse of Men. And I wanted to ask you a question about this because you just shared this very vulnerable
Powerful.
history of yours about a man beating you. This book, my understanding, is actually a male's experience of a woman beating him. Is that right?
Yes, well, it was actually my master's thesis and for my master's in psychology. And we had to write about a subject that we were familiar with. Now, at first I was going to research the abuse of women by men, but I found that a lot of literature had already covered that field. So I thought, I wonder, has anything been written on the abuse of men by women? And I found that there was virtually nothing that had been written about that. So that was when I decided to research the abuse of men by women. And I interviewed 48 men from Australia and New Zealand. And they told me about the horrific abuse they had experienced at the hands of their female partners.
Is there any story that comes to mind that you'd like to share with our audience?
Well, I looked at physical, psychological, and sexual abuse. Now, I had not realised up until that point that it was possible for a woman to sexually abuse a man. But there was one particular case where this man told me that his partner would demand sex at any hour of the day or night. And if he either couldn't or wouldn't comply with what she wanted, she would then go on the attack. She'd say, look, what are you, a man or a mouse? And it was just an unrelenting pressure that he just couldn't cope with.
No, goodness. Thank you for exploring that topic and sharing that, because I think it is a discussion that's not had.
I think what has happened since the Me Too movement, all the emphasis has been on the abuse of women by men, and the abuse of men by women has just been forgotten about.
And it shouldn't be.
No.
So tell us about how you, just shifting gears a little bit, how did you come in contact with the spirit world? I think there's a good story behind this one, and I'm excited to learn it.
Yes, well, it was when a set of keys disappeared, and I couldn't find any explanation for it, so I went to see a psychic, and he could not see what had happened to the keys, but he said there's a being on the other side who wants to talk to you. Now, this being turned out to be Edith Cavell, the English nurse, and she said to me, look, you own a pendant. When you get home, I want you to hold that pendant perfectly still. Ask me a question. If the answer is yes, it will swing horizontally. If the answer is no, it will swing vertically. Well, I'm a skeptic by disposition, and I thought, oh, this is never going to work. But when I got home, I got the pendant out and I closed all the doors and the windows so there'd be no breeze, and I held that pendant rigid. I asked it a question, and I could not believe it when the thing actually moved, exactly the way Edith said. So from then on, I just communicated with spirits all my life. This was about 30 years ago, and I've been communicating with spirits for 30 years.
Well, tell us more about that. That's fascinating.
Well,
your energy changed when you did that. You just went do 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 do.
Well, look, I asked them about everything. When I was doing my master's degree, they told me that they wanted me to do a PhD in philosophy. And I said to them, I've never even been to a philosophy lecture. They won't even accept me. They said, go ahead and apply. So I applied to all the universities in Sydney, but they would not accept me because they found out, or I told them that I hadn't even been to a philosophy lecture. But then I contacted the professor in Tasmania, and he said, yes, I'm interested, because I told him why I thought a particular philosopher was wrong. And he said, I'm interested in what you're saying. Put your application in. So I put it in, I was accepted, and then I did a PhD in Tasmania.
That's okay. So 30 years of connecting with the spirit world. Give us some great examples or stories that have just filled you up with this. And I get that this connection that you've had has helped smooth out the first 23 years of the Christian, I don't even want to just put a label on it, the household that you were raised in.
Well, my degree in psychology helped me to understand how seriously psychologically damaged my father was.
Oh.
But the things that I talked to them about when I was doing my PhD in philosophy, because I didn't have a background in philosophy, I had to ask them, what does this philosopher mean when he uses this particular word? Now, the first philosopher I was referred to was Aristotle. So he helped clarify a whole lot of stuff that I didn't understand. Then Aristotle referred me to the French philosopher Jacques Derrida, and he explained a lot. And then finally, Jacques Derrida referred me to Thomas Aquinas, the great medieval theologian and philosopher. So all these philosophers helped to clarify the ideas that they were writing about.
That's fantastic. I mean, you might as well just go to the source.
I mean, if you can have lunch with Aristotle, why wouldn't you?
Why wouldn't you?
Why wouldn't you? Speaking of having lunch with people who are no longer here, I think it brings up a curious question of have you had any connection or reconnection of any kind with your dad?
Yes, my dad is on the other side, and I did connect with him a couple of times, and I said, "How do you feel about the way you treated me?" And he said, "I am so ashamed of what I did." So that made it a lot easier for me to forgive him when I realised that he was ashamed of what he'd done.
Well, it's
He-
almost like he was brainwashed.
Well, he was beaten by his own father.
I was waiting for that. I was waiting for that.
And my father was such a narcissist. And
I was waiting for that one too.
He saw himself as being this most wonderful man.
Oh, yes.
So he said, "Well, I became this wonderful man because my father beat me. Now, if I beat my daughter, she'll become a wonderful woman."
Would you say that if you took away the beatings, I understood you said he's a narcissist. Was he a good person outside of that?
Oh, outside the home, he was an excellent preacher, and people thought he was the loveliest man.
That's kind of what I thought.
Yeah.
Which fed his ego even more, of course.
Oh, yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Well,
that was what we
drive-
call a vicious cycle of
almost wanting to keep driving it and doing it more to you. Have you
well,
connected
he's
with your
getting
mom?
yeah.
Oh, sorry, Brian.
No, I was just saying he's getting validated by
Yeah.
what he interpreted as God speaking to him through his parishioners, his, the people at the grocery store saying, gosh, I don't know your father's name, but he's getting all this confirmation that what he's doing is not just appropriate, but good.
Oh, yes.
He's
yes,
being a man of God.
Yes, he would have got validation from everybody.
Did it ever come out while he was on the earth plane what he did to you?
Oh, no, until the day he died, he thought he was the most wonderful father on earth.
Oh.
And because he thought I had turned out sort of reasonably well, he said, "Well, I must have done a good job. Look at my daughter. She's accomplished."
Oh.
So there's some other relationships that I've had where I've gotten to understand very intimately from the woman that I knew who was abused by either a male father, whoever that male person was, a massive resentment towards the mother figure. A very, very difficult relationship. Was that present with your mom, or was that different?
Oh, my mother was caught in a bind. She tried to love me, but it was very difficult for her to love me because just as my father rejected my basic personality, my mother also rejected my basic personality. See, Christianity teaches that a woman must be quiet, gentle, and submissive. I was nothing like that. I said what I thought.
Lynn, I can feel you from there. Like, woo! Yeah, you weren't anything like that, but it's a good thing. By the way, it's a compliment for me to say that. Oh no, I bet your parents didn't know what to do with you.
No, I was a puzzle. What does God want us to do with this rebellious child?
Yeah.
See,
But the thing is, you guys all made this agreement before you came down. So that was so interesting that, right? You chose them and then
yes.
kind of partied together.
I chose my parents so I could write these 3 books.
Ooh. Yes, you did.
And the puzzle piece gets put in and it's complete.
Oh my goodness. Lynn, I wish you were in Minnesota. We could talk more and hang out. Is there anything? This is hard when we do these 22-minute segments because the time goes by so quickly. Is there anything else you want to share? We have 2 minutes left. Is there anything else outside of go buy her book, you guys? It is her memoir, Leaving Faith and Finding Meaning, A Preacher's Daughter's Search for God. And can we get that on Amazon?
That's
we can
right,
put it on your
yes.
website. What's your website again, Lynn?
LynneRenior.com.
That just sounds so lovely when you say your name.
It's spelled how it sounds.
It is
LynneRenior.com.
LynneRenior.com. I sound very Midwestern when I said that, didn't I?
you
Yeah, you
you
betcha.
blurred the last couple letters.
Because I was thinking it was French, so I was getting a
Film
little
noir. Film noir. Renoir.
fascinating book. I'm actually now I'm gonna talk to your publicist and make sure that I can get my hands on it because it sounds fascinating. And I just, as we wrap up, I want to thank you for your voice. I want to thank you for shedding light on situations where it's like you think that there's this norm and you have this spirit, you have this fire, you have this. By the way, you were very protected, by the way, totally coming in loud and clear that you had the team on the other side here, there, and everywhere that were really, really protecting you to get you where you are today. But then also for you to have the voice to shed light on the abuse, not only just abuse of men, women, men, but just in general. And I just want to thank you for that. And I know Brian feels the same way.
Thank you very much for inviting me, Kelly. I've really appreciated this. And thank you, Brian.
Well, thank you from Minneapolis to Australia. You guys, Lynne Renior. Yes, I did it. LynneRenior.com. She's on Facebook, her website. Get her book. If you're curious, support her. She's amazing. On behalf of Brian and Kelly and Brian and Lynn today, thank you so much for being a part of our journey. Thank you for listening to our show and supporting us. We're just so incredibly blessed. Have an amazing one.
Bye-bye.